guys, Xbox Tech Check back today with another video. Today we are going to be talking about Halo The Fall of Reach Sections 1 and 2 in preparation for Halo Silent Storm. First and foremost, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I got a couple of announcements before we jump into the video. First and foremost, this will be my final video for the year. Just as we go into the holiday season, between now and obviously New Year's, I'm going to be very busy with friends and family, so I won't be able to read as much. Therefore, I won't be able to get to the next video as quickly as possible, but I'm happy to at least get this last video out. Probably starting off with a good video to end it all for 2025. And second, to everyone who watched and tuned into my Halo Edge of Dawn videos, all three of them, thank you so much for that. The reception to those videos was way more than I was expecting. Obviously, I'm a very small YouTube channel, so when I release a video, I'm only expecting maybe anywhere between 20 and 200 views, depending on the type of video. But that was greatly exceeded when it came to those three videos, and to just all the amazing support from everyone who commented, everyone who subscribed. To all my new subscribers, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for subscribing. I hope you enjoy my content. We're very much just a big Halo book talk channel. So if you're here to learn more about the deeper lore and just, want to go on this journey from every Halo book from first to last chronologically, this is your place to be. And then obviously to my my older subscribers, those who have been here since I was just a small little Xbox channel, thank you for continuing to support me. Your constant feedback and views mean so much to me. I love making these videos for you guys. So just again, thank you to everyone who is here. Now let's talk about Halo The Fall of Reach. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm starting off with sections 1 and 2 of The Fall of Reach. As you know, I'm trying to follow these books chronologically as possible. Now, that's a little hard because after Contact Harvest, which ends in roughly February of 2525, technically you could do a number of things. You could jump to Silent Storm, which is about a year or so later in February and March of 2526. I'll get the actual dates for you later. Or you could jump over to The Fall of Reach, sections 1 and 2, which take place between the years 2517 to 2525. Now, if you're trying to do reading order, you can do whatever you want realistically when it comes to The Fall of Reach, because The Fall of Reach jumps around a lot. For example, the prologue takes place in 2535, then we jump back to 2517, then the last bit of section 2 ends in 2525, and then obviously the whole book takes place in 2552 with the actual Fall of Reach. So, before I get any more confusing, let me explain what you could do if you actually want to read all of this chronologically. You could do one of two things. You can either start Fall of Reach before or after Contact Harvest, because Contact Harvest takes place purely in 2524 to 2525, while the Fall of Reach takes place starting in 2517 and ending in 2552. So you can start it before or after, or if you just want to save it for when it, seamlessly goes into Halo the Flood, which is the novelization of Combat Evolved, you can save it for way later and skip it altogether. The only reason I'm doing this specifically is because I believe, or the way I look at it is, if you read sections 1 and 2 first, it's the origin story of Master Chief, how he was abducted, how he became a Spartan, how he is the man who he is. And then it goes perfectly into Silent Storm, which picks up just a couple months after the ending of section 2. So that is a long-winded way of saying I am doing this specifically because I wanted to follow as chronologically as possible. This will technically be the video that starts off Fall of Reach, and then part 2 will be going directly into 2552 with the full-on Fall of Reach, which I will begin way later, probably after, I believe it's Meridian Divide is the one after that. Alright, so let's jump into the actual story. So the prologue's kind of weird in a way to me, I think. Remember, this book is written by Eric Nyland. He was the man to set us on this path of all these books that we are on. The book predates Combat Evolved by just a month. I can't remember the exact date, but it's September or October, when Halo Combat Evolved released in November 15th of 2001. So this is where the big joke comes that Halo is actually more of a book series than a game series because it predates the games by literally like a month or two. But overall, this is the very first book that started it all. And you kind of see that with the way things are talked about. Some of the things that we know to be like hardcore lore, though, isn't actually mentioned in this, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But the first prologue starts off in 2535 on the planet of Jericho 7. The Master Chief is already the Master Chief. Basically, they're on this planet trying to fight the Covenant. We see a couple of the different teams, red team, blue team, and green team. The fun thing about this is we know that we're getting a re-release of this book sometime next year. And they're saying they're tweaking numbers and dates and all that just to, again, make it fit better with the lore. One of these things I think they're going to fix is in this book, it talks about how Chief says there's 4 of them in blue team, but then he says blue 5 a lot. And it's kind of like, wait, so are you counting yourself? And then like, why is the numbering not working here? It's a little weird and funny, but I think it's one of those small things that they're going to fix, or maybe they're not, and I'm just misreading it. But overall, all you need to know is they're on this planet. They are essentially trying to be... Blue team's trying to be a diversion for red team. While red team sneaks into basically a Covenant stronghold and plants a nuke. This is essentially where Covenant supercarriers come down, land, deliver troops and supplies. The idea is while blue team is being that diversion, red team will sneak in, plant the bomb, so that way when a ship comes through again, they can set it off, making, a giant bang go off in this place. After the mission is a success, all of the Spartans are actually called back to their ship. And the reason why is because the Covenant is just going to start glassing Jericho 7. Chief and the rest of his Spartans make it back to their ship. Chief asks to watch the glassing of the planet. The captain says that's fine. Chief watches it, and it's just one of those things that, you realize it's been 10 years of Covenant war for the Chief, so he's seen many planets burn, and each time is harder and harder to watch. So then we switch gears back to August of 2517 when a young Lieutenant Jacob Keyes is on board a shuttle with Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Halsey, as well as the AI known as Torin. Keyes is here because he is essentially supposed to be acting as like a security guard for Halsey, who is a civilian scientist who is employed by the Office of Naval Intelligence, aka ONI. And the reason he is here is because Halsey has, read his file, and she knows that he's good at keeping secrets. There's a major plot point that happens to him in his past that while everyone else is testifying against their original CO, he kind of keeps himself reserved, doesn't say anything, and Halsey likes that trait, especially given the fact that she is here to observe a child for her Spartan program, and so having someone who can keep a secret is integral to what she's doing. As they make their way to the planet of Uranus 2, Halsey explains to Keyes that they're here to observe a child that could be the difference between, life and death, the beginning or the end of humanity. On the planet, they make their way to Elysium City, to one of the school districts, where they see this young boy playing King of the Hill. He's getting in there, he's fighting, he's punching, he's getting hurt. He doesn't care, but he is winning. This is a boy who's very brash, very arrogant, but also keeps winning. He every other kid doesn't want to play with him because of how well he does, how brutal he can be, and how often he wins. He is known as Subject 117 to Halsey, aka John. Halsey goes up to him, and if you've seen the Follow Reach movie, you know what she does. She talks to him. A lot of our major quote lines that we get with Cortana and Chief are, reminiscent of who Halsey was at this time, like saying, "You like games, so do I." They do the coin flip game. Chief wins, or John wins, I should say, gets to keep the coin and runs off. Halsey being like, "Oh, I shouldn't call him John. I can't have attachments to this child." One thing you'll know about this book, at least at the very start, is it jumps months quickly. Like 1 minute we're in August, then we're in September, then October, then November. Like it goes quick, and then we even jump years even quicker. But all you need to know is directly after her interaction with John, we immediately jump about a month later, and now she's standing inside of an amphitheater on the planet of Reach. All 75 children have been brought to the planet to essentially be conscripted into the Spartan 2 program. Before that, though, Halsey is talking with Deja, a dumb AI that will be essentially the teacher of the Spartans for their academics, while also talking to Chief Petty Officer Franklin Menendez, who will be training these Spartans to become soldiers. During this conversation, Deja recommends to Halsey that maybe the children should be lied to about why they're here, or at the very least, be given targeted amnesia so they start to forget their past as normal kids. I find this a little interesting because, as we know, if you've watched the beloved TV show, guys, you will note that in that one, Silver Team doesn't remember their past. They've all been given these pellets that suppress their emotions. They have had target amnesia that suppress their memories of just ever being normal kids. And that's very reminiscent of what's happening here. Deja says we should lie to them or we should make them forget. Halsey says no, because lying to them sets up a future of problems should they find out the truth. So imagine kind of like how Johnny Halo Rings in the TV show, when he finds out he actually had a normal past, how he was targeted, how he was lied to, how he was made to forget, how angry he was with Halsey. The Master Chief in the actual canon doesn't have that. He knows what happens to him. He knows he was kidnapped. He knows he was, subjected to like the most brutal training and childhood he could ever have. And yet he doesn't blame Halsey. He's not mad at Halsey. He is okay. He believes that he belongs right where he's at. So maybe Halsey in the Silver timeline should have taken some notes. Now, after Halsey pretty much explains to the kids why they're there going to be, humanity's greatest heroes and champions, there's a weird line where after all this happens, the kids leave. Halsey pretty much like has internal dialogue where she says like Oni sees the children who don't make it out of the SMART program as acceptable losses. And throughout this book, or at least this 2 sections, we see Halsey very much tormented by what she's doing. She doesn't really try to justify it as much as we are led to believe. I feel like with the games and more recent media, it always makes it seem like Halsey just doesn't care what she did. Like, oh, it was for their greater good. Humanity will absolve me of my crimes in the future. Oh, like everything I did is justified. And it feels like she just doesn't care. But in this book, she cares. She's tormented. She hates that she's doing this to these children. Half the time she has to remind herself not to call them children. She has to call them test subjects or recruits or Spartans, just never children. She's constantly trying to erase that part of it, that term that is applied to them, but it's not easy for her. We then trans over to the next day. John is woken up to immediate intense training, 100 push-ups, 100 jumping jacks, 100 sit-ups. It's non-stop go for these 6-year-old children. And during all this, John has no idea where he's at. He doesn't know any of the children. He just wants to rest, but he's never given that moment to really rest and, take in everything that has happened. After morning calisthenics, they are then sent to Deja to learn more about history, math, all that kind of fun stuff. This is when they learn about the Battle of Thermopylae, the Spartans. The next thing they do is have yet another training course where they play Ring the Bell. The objective is for a team of 3 to make their way to the end of the course, ring the bell. Teams who win, pretty much every team besides the very last team, get to eat dinner, which is things like turkey, hot fudge sundaes, brownies, like all this like very rewarding stuff you got to have at the end of this brutal day, while the last team of 3 doesn't eat. John is paired with Kelly 087 and Sam 034. John doesn't see them as people who can really help him get through this, so he sees them more as people who will hold him back, other kids that aren't going to win. He believes himself to be the best, so therefore he will win. So the moment the training course starts, he immediately abandons them, makes his way to the end of the course, and he wins. He's the first to ring the bell. He's super excited, saying like, yep, I'm the best. At the end, Mendez pretty much says, yo, everyone gets to eat except for 117 and his team. And John's like, what the hell, I won. And Mendez says, well, you did win, but your team lost. And if your team doesn't win, you lose. Now, this is funny enough where one of the movies gets a little twisted. In the movie, it makes it seem like John immediately takes this and goes, oh, okay, I understand. I have to help my team win in order for me to win. All right, I'll apply that now. No, that doesn't happen. In the book, John pretty much is pissed. He is annoyed with Kelly and Sam. He even says that he has to think of a way to get back at them for making him lose. And I'm like, what the? This kid sucks. So the next day, everything pretty much goes the same. Morning calisthenics, then teaching from Deja, and then they're once again doing Ring the Bell. And this time he is once again paired with Kelly and Sam. Kelly and Sam pretty much shove him and say, like, you better not make us lose this time. And this is where John kind of goes, okay, fine, we can work together. And they do, and they don't come in first, they come in third place, but they win, technically, and they get to eat dinner, and this is where we see the friendship start for Kelly and Sam and John. We then fast forward 2 years later to 2519. John is now 8 years old along with his fellow Spartans. They are now doing the wood expedition. Now what this mission is for each child to be dropped off into a different part of the wilderness on Reach, and each is given a small fragment of a map. Their objective is to use their little fragment to make it to the exfil point and get off. The last trainee not to make it will be left behind and has to walk home on a very long walk. Immediately, John shows leadership traits by, while they're in the ship, he spots major landmarks saying, hey, let's meet up here, pass that along to the other recruits without Mendez or anyone else hearing. While they all finally, meet back up somewhere near a river, everyone's kind of figuring out, okay, so who's being left behind? How do we determine that? Draw straws. And John says, no one's getting left behind. I'm going to find a way for us all to make it home. They all make it to the exfil point using the map that they all collectively brought together. They spot some soldiers who don't look to be in UNSC, regulations. So using what they learned from school with the wolves, they are able to, as a ginormous 75 group, take down these 4 non-standard military officers and then use autopilot to take the ship back to base. Seeing all this, at first Mendez seems pissed because they were UNSC officers. They were there to guard the ship and make sure the children got on the ship. However, John, being who he was, didn't see them in regulation, saw them as possible enemies after taking them out and stealing the ship, explains all this to Mendez and Halsey, who then say, all right, well, you're being promoted to squad leader. After this, we then do yet another jump from 2519 to 2525. So now John and the Spartans are 14 years of age, and this is the day that they will be receiving their augmentations. We do get a list of the augmentations, what they do, such as bone grafting to make their bones nearly indestructible, thyroid implants to help, growth being quicker and faster, all these other things that I'll leave a list of right here. And Halsey gets a message from an old colleague of hers where he explains hey, your hypothetical augmentations, we did a test or a hypothetical test on what would happen if you did this to bonobo apes. And these are, Halsey said that she was doing all on these apes to really throw them off. And again, they're supposed to be all hypothetical, but they're the closest things to humans she could find that wouldn't raise suspicion. And he pretty much says the risks are high. The failure rate is high. If they live, they're going to have severe side effects. If they do live, some of those side effects could be to the point where they're with Parkinson's, they're deranged, malformed, but death is the most likely cause. And it's funny here because Halsey kind of notes saying maybe we should delay to try and reduce the risks. And it's Deja, the dumb AI here, who is pretty much trying to justify why they need to speed this up, why they need to go through with the augmentations. She even says herself, Dr. Halsey, you can delay, but remember, your superiors want soldiers. If you delay, they'll just replace you with someone who doesn't have these thoughts that you are having. And quite frankly, you're the only person that should be on this project, but you will be replaced if you don't. And so it's Deja and it's Oni who are all shoving Halsey to doing this. It's not ever really Halsey going, well, that sucks to suck, let's just move forward. After the augmentations, 30 of the children die. Well, I guess teens at this point. 30 of the teen Spartans die. A dozen of them survive, but they're all malformed, Parkinson's, you name it. They have some sort of defect that prevents them from being a normal Spartan. These are people like Saren Osmond, who will become, the head of the Office of Naval Intelligence, aka Sync Oni. But those who do survive obviously become people like the Master Chief, Frederick 104, Samuel 034, the best of the best. Though John doesn't take this, easily. He sees the Spartans that died and the Spartans that, are no longer Spartans as his own failure. He said, I'm squad leader, what could I have done to prevent this? Mendez says, sometimes you have to send your men in to die for a worthy cause. Never waste their lives, only use them in the best way you can. And even though John, sees what he means, he still doesn't view this as an acceptable loss. We then transition over to John training in a training facility, and it's here we get to see what it's like to be a Spartan. And I feel like in the movie, it makes it seem like John and the Spartans just got right back up after augmentations and everything was fine, but it's not. John talks about how just walking is difficult. His bones ache, his eyes bleed every morning. He has severe headaches constantly. And some of the Spartans take longer to heal. For example, Kelly took a while to heal from the augmentations. They weren't even actually sure if she was going to live. While other Spartans like Sam healed quickly. Sam got right back up, not the next day, but relatively quicker than most of the other Spartans. And it's here when he's in this training facility, he starts to see the difference. Reaction time is quicker. Things falling, things moving seem slower to him. He's able to lift heavier weights. He keeps thinking something's wrong with the atmosphere, the gravity well within the ship, but it's not. It's him. He's moving faster. Everything is just different for him. And then this is, of course, where John was bench pressing a heavy amount of weight, took the pin off so he could test the gravity in there, forgot to put the pin back on the barbell, and as he was walking out, 4 ODS team members walk in and start training, but one of them, can't lift the same weight as a 14-year-old kid, loser. Then, he wavers a little bit, the weight falls off the side without the pin, he gets pissed. John tries to say, that's my fault, my apologies, here's the pin. The ODSTs are like, okay buddy, well you think you're funny, and they all start fighting him just for John to absolutely mollywhoop them and pretty much kill them. Now, he doesn't intentionally kill him. It's just the fact that, one, he is, being attacked, he's doing self-defense, and he doesn't understand his own strength. We then fast forward a few months, and Halsey comes back to Reach and realizes her Spartans aren't at the normal training facility. Halsey being like, yo, Mendez, where's my Spartans? He says, we have some underground caverns that I had to move them to train them because, quite frankly, after your Spartans got back to the planet and we started hand-to-hand combat training again, they killed 4 of our trainers, and that made me realize that we can no longer train them like normal. So then he takes her to one of these underground caverns, and we see that the trainers are now within Mark 1 Milner, or what was originally inspiration for Milner, these big mech type suits. And the Spartans are moving fast and they're hitting hard, that they're still not killing the trainers, but they're hurting them within this armor set. Mendez notes that Spartans can run up to 35 miles per hour. They can lift twice their body weight. They can virtually see in the dark. Certain Spartans are even greater in those charts, such as Kelly can run faster than the normal 34. Since Samuel is so much bigger than the other Spartans, he can lift a little more. It's these different variation traits within each Spartan, but what she needs to know is what you expected has been greatly exceeded with these Spartans. Seeing this, Halsey says, okay, cool. I want to send them on their first mission. Oni wants them to hit the ground running. Can they do that? Mendez says, yeah. And she's like, okay, cool, because things are about to change. And this is where he notes, oh, I heard some crazy things were going down at Harvest. Is that true? And she says, your intel's off. There is no Harvest. Now, this is honestly why I say you should read Contact Harvest first, because there's a lot of talk about Harvest in this book, at least within section 2, where you get to see the amplification into the Covenant War. They don't say Covenant, they don't talk about aliens for quite a bit, but you hear Harvest has fallen. Something's going on Harvest, and you're like, I know what happens here. Anyways, fast forwarding. The mission that the Spartans have been tasked with is to capture the insurrection leader, Colonel Robert Watts. He is currently hiding within an asteroid belt on one of the asteroids big enough to hold a city. Kind of think about that city that is in the TV show. Yes, I know we hit a TV show, but it's similar to that type of city civilization that they have in those asteroid belts. Their mission is to find Watts, secure him, bring him back. John is promoted to Petty Officer 3rd Class, and he is told to pick a team of Spartans to go into this mission. John, realizing that he can only take a team of 5 to 6, chooses, obviously, himself, Kelly 087, Samuel 0034, Linda 058, and Frederick 104 as his team. Now, there's no mention of blue team, so to speak. It's just his team that he chooses. And he gives off a brief description of each Spartan, why he chose them. Fred is very good with knives. He's also comes in second. And John feels like Fred could probably come in first in a lot of things, but doesn't like the attention. And I think in the later lore it says that Fred didn't come in first because he knew he could, but for him, he wanted to, defer to the chief. He saw John as their leader, and he wanted to maintain that legacy in view of John. Linda 058 obviously being the best sniper, but also the quietest on the team. Kelly 087 being the fastest, and Sam being the biggest, but also kind of like their demolition expert. Like, he brings bombs and stuff a lot with him. Like, I kind of wish we had him more in games because he's kind of a psychopath. Now, the mission pretty much goes off without a hitch. The team sneaks on to a cargo ship that is heading into this asteroid belt to the specific city. They find one of the cargo containers that contains the luxury items, chocolates, cigars, champagne, and realize this is definitely going to Watts, place a tracker on it, and we'll follow it to him. That specific cargo container goes into the tallest building in the city. They make their way in without ever being seen or heard. When they are even seen, the enemy is quickly neutralized. And they make it into this room where there's a few guards guarding Watts, and obviously Watts himself. Now, in the movie, it shows how Sam got cocky, and someone tried to shoot Sam, and John pushed him out of the way, and therefore got shot. That doesn't happen, actually. In the book, John just walks in, and he can't shoot the enemy because they're kind of right next to Watts, and Watts is supposed to be taken alive. So he kind of has this moment where he's kind of a deer in headlights. He can't really do anything, giving his enemy enough time to react and shoot at him. He dodges quick enough, but he does get a shot into the rib cage, and that is pretty much how he gets wounded on his first mission. Fortunate enough that it's very easy for them to, take out the rest of the enemy, secure Watts, get off the ship. John receives a Purple Heart, and he's, obviously quickly taken care of with the wound. And it's a very easy mission success for them that, it fills John with pride, but at the same time, when they're escaping, they have to detonate these bay doors that will pretty much open a hole for them to escape from the asteroid. This leads to a lot of civilian and contractor deaths that doesn't sit well with John at first, but he quickly shoves it away, saying, okay, this was a mission, my team's okay, mission was a success, I gotta keep moving forward. About a month later, John reaches Amphitheater, the same amphitheater that him and the Spartans came into the first time when they were conscripted by Halsey. And this time there is now, Mendez, Halsey, Vice Admiral Stanforth, and a cool, creepy, Grim Reaper looking AI known as Beowulf. This is where Vice Admiral Stanforth pretty much tells the Spartans that Harvest has fallen to an unidentified ship. We obviously know this ship from Halo Contact Harvest. He then talks about how ships were sent in through both the CMA, which was what Johnson was part of in Contact Harvest, as well as UNSC ships that were sent to investigate, and all these ships fell. And this is cool because if you remember from my little epilogue part from the Contact Harvest video, in that Mac talks about how he saw other ships coming to Harvest and he tried warning them to run away, but they were ultimately destroyed. These were the ships that were sent originally. One of the ships does escape from Harvest and makes it back to Reach, but it's through a few weeks of travel because their slipspace engine was damaged. And this is fortunate because this is a time when the cold protocol does not exist. So if that ship had immediately gone from Harvest to Reach, Reach could have fallen much quicker than it actually does. Obviously, so this is here where we discover about the Covenant and how they are the instrument of the gods and all this kind of stuff. And Stanforth pretty much told the Spartans that their training is to be accelerated. They're going directly into the Milner section of their, training, essentially the last section of training. Mendez is leaving because he's going to be training the next group of Spartans, and that the UNSC is in full mobilization. Before Mendez leaves, he talks about the different ways of winning with Chief, and he feels like one of those ways is surrender, but he says that surrender is not an option for people like Chief and Mendez John and Mendez, because he doesn't view, one, there as people who can surrender, and two, he doesn't perceive the Covenant as a species that's just going to let humanity surrender. It's kind of going to be a fight to the death, type of situation. He also gives John back the coin that John originally got from Halsey when he first met her, all the way back in 2517. Mendez gets up, shakes John's hand, says there's nothing more he can teach him, and that he believes John is prepared. And then he turns and leaves. And this is something I didn't realize, but this is the last time John will ever see Mendez. We then shift gears. The Spartans are being transported upon a frigate known as the Commonwealth by Captain Wallace to the planet of Kai Ceti 4 to receive Milner. They still have no idea what Milner is. They believe it to be some sort of weapon. When they get there, they find that there's a Covenant cruiser very close by. The cruiser pretty much gets closer because it has, more advanced subspace technology. And then we have a quick dogfight between these two ships. Utilizing, Archer pod missiles, 2 Mach shots, and a Havoc nuke, all the UNSC is able to do is briefly damage this Covenant ship, while the Covenant ship was able to severely damage the Commonwealth to the point that the captain informs Halsey that he's just going to have to do a flyby, and all the Spartans and her are going to have to get on a Pelican and fly down to the planet. Right, the Spartans make it down to the planet, take a 15-minute elevator type thing down to this very deep sub-level base, where they see a room full of technicians, multiple AIs, and mannequins holding armor. This is when we get to see what Milner is. It is the armor the Spartans will wear. We get a brief description of the materials and the overall specifications of what the armor can do. She also explains that non-augmented people cannot wear it because the armor reacts so fast that it essentially just crushes your bones if you're not augmented. And even in the movie, it explains it pretty well that, even Spartans, it's unknown whether Spartans can wear it either. They should be able to because of how, strong their muscles and bones are, but they're still worried that maybe they can't. And so obviously when she's asking for volunteers, everyone raises their hands. Unlike the movie where John says, no, I'll be the volunteer. In this one, everyone raises their hand. Halsey goes, John, you're the lucky one. Let's go with you. John puts the armor on, and even he has some quick issues with it. When he tries to salute, he moves too fast. When he tries to do certain movements, it goes too fast, and it bruises him. He even says parts of it hurt him, but at the same time it feels light, and it almost feels like a secondary skin. He almost doesn't feel like he's wearing armor, but it is hard for him to get used to the movements. And at first he's a little worried about hand signals because they're so used to using it, but then he learns that the onboard communication systems with the other Spartans is so much more seamless and easy. And that's one thing I like about Halo books is the way they utilize pinging and all of the communication systems in the Mjolnir armor. Obviously it doesn't do full justification for it here, but it will in a later novel. After every Spartan receives their armor, they're realizing, okay, we're good to go. Captain Wallace informs them that okay, we need to leave now, that ship is coming back. So they take every Spartan in their armor, all the technicians, Halsey, obviously all the AI crystals, and a few spare sets of armor onto a Pelican. And again, Pelicans, are relatively big, but that is a lot of people in one Pelican, plus spare Mjolnir armors, which weigh roughly a ton. I don't really know that's possible. I think this is one of those parts where maybe when Eric Nowlan was writing it, he didn't know the full specifications and designs of a Pelican enough. But either way, they all get off the planet, and just before they're getting back to the Commonwealth, John realizes that the best way to attack this Covenant ship is to strike first. So then he pretty much asks that if him and his Spartans can go EVA, board the ship, taking some of the warheads that are on the ship, and detonate them within and escape. Halsey's a little hesitant at first, but she ultimately sees the logic in John's plan. This is where it's a little weird because, obviously in the movie we only see what's technically known as Blue Team go up there, but it almost sounds like all the Spartans go EVA, but obviously most of them get split up. And the main focuses are on our three Spartans, which are John, Kelly, and Sam, who make it in. They board the ship, find their way to the reactor. They encounter a couple of jackals. One of them is able to fire at John, but this is where Sam pushes John out of the way and takes the bolt. And at first he says, I'm fine, everything's good. They make their way to the reactor, plant the bombs. John then turns to Sam and says, all right, you know your orders, you have to stay here and pretty much like guard the warheads to make sure they go off in the next 3 minutes. Kelly's confused, but both John and Sam know that Sam's armor has been, punctured. He's compromised. There's no way he's making off this ship, because the moment he steps out into the vacuum of space, his armor will decompress and he will just die instantaneously. And John is more stoic in this than he is in the movie, but it is this moment where even internally you see John doesn't want to leave Sam. Sam has been his brother from day one. He wants to stay and fight with him. He wants to protect him. He'd rather die with him than leave him, but ultimately he realizes that he has to set an example for the rest of the Spartans. If, he has to spend this one life. This is what Mendez was talking about. After, saluting each other, John and Kelly make their way off the planet using their thrusters. They make it to the vacuums of space, and it's here that they make their escape, and Section 2 ends. So that is Fall of Reach Sections 1 and 2. Now, Halo Silent Storm will pick up just a couple months later in 25-26, which is why, again, I wanted to start with this book and move into that one. But yeah, that is the story. Now, I did a lot of preparation for this. I read the book, obviously. I read the comic. I watched the movie. And I even read Halsey's journal. Pretty much everything is pretty much seamless. Even the movie does well with a lot of things. Though, again, there's parts that are a little, weird, because it's Halsey never has the saying, better to separate the chaff from the wheat when it comes to, the trainees. Matter of fact, I don't think it ever mentions that any of the children die or run away. Not run away. A lot of them try to run away, we know that. But I don't think it ever mentions that any of the Spartans die during training. So that part where she's like, oh, separate the chaff from the wheat, never happens. Halsey's more reluctant to do things. She's actually more pressured by Oni and Deja. Whereas in the movie, it seems like it's her saying, we have to accelerate training. We have to do this. We have to do this. It doesn't matter. It's all justified. Do not worry. That just doesn't happen. She's very much more, reluctant to do anything that will harm the kids. And of course, the biggest thing is there's a heavy focus on trying to put Linda and Fred in a lot of these scenes, when Linda and Fred don't even show up until that first mission, when they're already 14 and augmented, and try to get Watts. And that's kind of the only mission that they're pivotal in this book. They do make appearances, obviously, when they get Milner, but then when they go onto the Covenant ship, it's just John, Kelly, and Sam. It's not also Fred and Linda. Obviously, I know that when this movie came out, Halo 5 was coming out, and so the focus was trying to say, hey, look, this is Blue Team. This is Fred, Linda, Kelly. This is why they're so important to John in Halo 5. But when it comes to the book, since they weren't as pivotal to John as Kelly and Sam were. So, what should you read, watch, play, and or do in order to prepare for Halo The Fall of Reach? Well, that's a hard one. If you're just jumping into the books, I would say you don't really need to do anything. Specifically, if you're trying to go in chronological order, I would say maybe just read Contact Harvest and then go into sections 1 and 2. But you don't even need to do that, because Contact Harvest, the only thing you're going to get from Contact Harvest to this is going to be the Fall of Harvest. And even then, part of this book takes place before the Fall of Harvest. But if you're just wanting to be as engaged in the lore as possible, as chronological as possible, here's what you could do. So one, again, I would say essentially you would want to read Contact Harvest. I think it transitions nice and well into this book. Likewise, you could also try and find, hopefully, a copy of Halsey's journal. Halsey's journal was part of the Halo Reach Collector's Edition. They're probably harder to find nowadays because, obviously, the Collector's Edition's not made. I kind of wish 343/Halo Studios would just re-release copies of it. I do believe somewhere on Halo Waypoint you can find like a digital version, and I'll leave a link down below if you want to read that. But there's parts in here that talk about like her overall like thought process when it came to, you know, artificial intelligence, Milner, why children were the perfect candidates for Spartan 2, how she came up with things like the Spartan program name, all this kind of stuff that just kind of complements this book really well. The other one you can read, and this one's not as essential, but it's more complimentary to the story, is Pariah, the very first short story in Fractures that's going to talk about Soren 066, who is like one of the many children part of the Spartan 2 program who, instead of becoming a full Spartan, has something else happen to him. I don't want to spoil it for this specific video. I'll get more into it when I get to Fractures later down the road. You don't have to read this to understand Fall of Reach. It's just very much like it complements the story. It adds more to the story than anything else. Last but not least, you could also, if you're more of a visual person, you can watch the movie. I would say the movie, it's actually not as bad as I remember people saying it is. There's definitely parts of it that are weird, like I explained earlier. Obviously, the other thing is Mjolnir armor wasn't as diverse with like the different helmet designs and then the numbering on their chest plates. You have to pretty much just think it as this, where it's all the exact same Mark IV armor that, you know, Red Team wears in Halo Wars 1 and 2. It's the same armor. Again, the only difference is they don't have their service numbers on the armor, though. I enjoy that personally. But yes, you can watch the movie. Just know that there are some things that I have issues with when it comes to lore and, you know, how they explain some of the things in there. But two, you could pick up a copy of The Fall of Reach, either the boot camp edition, where it's just specifically the sections that I've read off with a little bit more on like Robert Watts, or you could pick up the full Fall of Reach comic book, which will, you know, entail the boot camp section as well as everything else up until The Fall of Reach in 2552. But that is pretty much it for today's video. Those are all the things you can read, watch, and or do to prepare for Fall of Reach. But like I said, it's such a good book on its own that you don't really need them. But I'll explain more about like ways you can also engage with the lore when we get to sections, I think 3 and 4 is what's left in here. Sections 1 and 2 only encompass the first 160 pages, and it's kind of a quick read. So honestly, I recommend just starting there and then jumping over to Silent Storm like I'm doing. But yes, that is it for today's video and for the last video of the year. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in Halo Silent Storm.